For the first time, Bitcoin's market capitalization has dropped below 50% of all cryptocurrencies. It's not because of a drop in interest, none of it. It's just pulled back slightly from a run of recent record highs. It's more that the global enthusiasm for blockchain is catching on in a big way. Ethereum, for a while, the number 2 has been rising at a greater rate. Then there are others, Litecoin, Ripple, and Dash is amongst the smallest. So Michael Hudson joins us now from Bitstocks. Michael, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome back, because we've had some good discussions about Bitcoin before and how you expected this recent rise. In fact, you were anticipating that we've got at the moment. I'll ask you more about the price on Bitcoin in just a minute. But I want to start off first of all about talking about the way in which this has all grown and the fact that Bitcoin is now worth less than 50% of the total market capitalization. Do you see this as significant?
It's significant, but it's actually significant in a way that people aren't really viewing it right now. People are seeing that Bitcoin's actually bleeding a lot of market cap into these other alts and Bitcoin's losing dominance. But when you actually boil down into the figures, the altcoin market's effectively gone from effectively 2.2 billion at the start of the year to in excess of $30 billion. But Bitcoin hasn't actually leaked value into effectively these altcoins, because Bitcoin itself has also climbed exponentially in value and reached all-time highs in the same period as well. So what that actually means is that ecosystem as a whole is getting new capital injection into the ecosystem. So it's more fiat currency, government currency, being traded for this new alternative form of finance.
Where does this take us then now with all these others that are becoming more significant? Because my understanding was Bitcoin was unregulated, it was a global currency, you could use it away from monetary authorities, you could use it away from individual countries. But here we are now with a setup potentially where we've got competing cryptocurrencies, and it makes for a more complicated picture, doesn't it?
It does. And when we boil it down and we go back to the beginning, like why? Why was this technology even invented in the first place? And why is there so much choice? And for the first time ever, what Bitcoin introduced is the ability to have choice. We've grown up in a society where monetary systems are enforced upon us. There's a marriage between money and state, something that can't actually be decoupled. And if you want to experience a different form of relationship between money and state, you have to go across geographical borders. What Bitcoin introduced for the first time ever is by creating a digital system that cannot be duplicated. So when you now have a digital system that can't be duplicated, it has a variety of different use cases. So what these plethora of different altcoins do with Bitcoin is they ultimately serve as a testbed. A lot of these altcoins have effectively taken the source code of Bitcoin itself, made a few different changes here, there, and everywhere, and provided different utilities for us to create experiments to say, okay, let's see how decentralized cloud storage works. Let's see how smart contracts works in Ethereum's case. What about if I want to build an organization that is no longer a relationship between one human being sending one transaction to another human being, or a collective of human beings under a banner of a corporation sending transactions to another collective of human beings? For the first time ever, we can now have machines that own money and machines that remit payments. So before that you do all of this different forms of payment systems and monetary systems on top of Bitcoin itself, it's actually advantageous to experiment by taking Bitcoin's code, making a few changes and seeing if these changes actually has a market. And what we're seeing with the rise of the altcoin markets is that there's such an appetite now that, and where that appetite is predominantly coming from as well, is that there's a lot of education now coming into the space, and more people are understanding more about what this technology is, learning about Bitcoin and be like, okay, well, if Bitcoin could do this, why can't we do smart contracts? Why can't we do decentralized cloud? Why can't we do all these different interpretations of what distributed ledger technology can provide? And these technologies are now really, really gaining traction. But what needs to be understood, and this goes back to your first question about Bitcoin losing market share to these altcoins, because what is paramount when it comes to cryptocurrencies is effectively something called hashing power. So that ultimately means is how much power the actual network has to secure this new digital form of ecosystem. And the reason why Bitcoin has been coined the term the Internet of Money, the reason why Bitcoin has been referred to digital gold, is because it has the most amount of computational power. So if you're going to build an organization on top of this technology, if you're going to build a charity on top of this technology, if you're going to build any form of different application on top of this technology, you need to build it on top of the right foundation. So whereas projects like Ethereum, Dash, Litecoin, and all of these different projects provide different forms of functionality, which are far more experimental and arguably even more exciting than what Bitcoin is doing right now, are these concepts being built on the right foundations. So if you take this to a more layman's example, if you're building a house, you want to build that on concrete foundation. Well, a concrete foundation right now in the cryptocurrency space is Bitcoin, right? But if you want to build a house on, say, sand or a much less stable foundation, well, you can get it up and running, but you don't really know how long it's going to stay standing. And that's kind of where Ethereum right now is as a technology, amazing. But foundation, there's question marks.
Okay, so it's still experimental at that level. So are you satisfied that Bitcoin is here to stay and it's got the foundations right? Or are you saying that Bitcoin was just the original one and we're now experimenting with other possible better versions?
Yeah, Bitcoin's got a foundation right because right now it's still king. Hash power is king. So within Bitcoin, because it has so much computational power, if you put it into scale, you take the top 500 supercomputers in the world, you combine their computational power, times that by 1,000, it still doesn't compare to Bitcoin. Google's hashing power, combine all of that together, times that by 2,000, it still doesn't compare to Bitcoin's hashing power. So that is why Bitcoin is being called digital gold, because if you take anything from the physical realm and take it into the digital realm, look what happened to the music industry, look what happened to the movie industry, it's very easy to duplicate and you lose value. And what these industries had to do is change their business model because they couldn't contain the technology going digital. So they had to create services like Netflix, create services like Spotify, subscription-based services to stay alive. Well, when it comes to Bitcoin technology, for the first time ever, we have a digital system that can't be duplicated. And the underlying thing that protects Bitcoin's value is its immutability factor. That as soon as you do something on the Bitcoin blockchain, it's even better than writing something on stone.
Right. Okay. Let me just bring up the price of Bitcoin to see exactly where we are with this, because this has been the rise that we've seen, and as we've seen this rise, we've seen these other cryptocurrencies come up as well. Do you think that by possibly the end of this year or next year or something, we'll either have double the number, or are there a limited number of cryptocurrencies that we can have within this space? Ultimately, is it only ever going to be one?
There's already thousands of alternatives to Bitcoin, and I don't see that slowing down anytime soon. What we are going to see is, are all of these cryptocurrencies all going to have their own individual floating price? Right? Because what is happening right now is, in order to trial these different types of adaptations of the technology, people are doing it with their own coins, they have their own floating price, they have to go through their own price discovery experience. It's incredibly volatile and all the rest of it. And that is where it is right now. But there's already technologies which haven't been integrated into Bitcoin yet, where you can get the features of what these coins are offering without them having their own individual floating price. And what that is called in the ecosystem is a sidechain or a two-way peg. So what you'll be able to do is go into the benefits of Ethereum without having to be subject to the increased volatility that Ethereum has that Bitcoin doesn't necessarily have, but you want all the features. So you want the stability of the power of the Bitcoin ecosystem, thereby digital gold, right? And you also want the stability in terms of Bitcoin's volatility in comparison to these altcoins as well. So instead of being exposed to these different prices of these altcoins, you can just build the feature sets on top of Bitcoin itself. Right now, admittedly, due to a little bit of frustration with how Bitcoin is scaling, that people have gone out there and just started building the applications on top of other projects. But there's already a project in development right now, soon to be released within the next month, called Rootstock. And what Rootstock allows is for all the applications that are being built on top of Ethereum right now, which is why Ethereum value has gone up exponentially, will be directly portable onto Bitcoin itself. Right. So then that goes back to, do you want to take your house off the sand and put it on the concrete?
Okay, let me just quickly move this into what I would regard as a bit more of the real world, because I think taking us away from the digital currency world, I want to bring in the point that's been made recently by Apple and PayPal. They're saying they want to see some sort of regulation of Bitcoin. They want to start using Bitcoin on a more regular basis. But they want regulation, which from past conversations we've had, is exactly what Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies don't want. They can't sustain regulation. If it is regulation, it's going to be regulation by the US authorities, and then no other country is going to want to start accepting it, because it'll be a US-based digital currency or cryptocurrency. What's your thought then on that?
I've read through the article on Apple and what PayPal said. See, when it comes to regulation, there's so many different facets, right? If we go back to the root, what is the purpose of regulation? Consumer protection, right? Now, are you now talking about regulating Bitcoin, regulating the technology, or regulating companies who are utilizing technology? Because that makes a lot more sense, right? So the on-ramps and off-ramps, my company is a perfect example. We take custodian of other people's Bitcoins. We need to adhere to certain regulatory rule sets. We advocate regulation, and we was at the Digital Currency Summit in Gibraltar really advocating the framework that they laid out as to how to regulate companies operating in space. But where jurisdictions like Gibraltar, what they have basically said is, look, we can't regulate the technology. There's no point wasting resources and expenses trying to regulate technology. It's just not possible. So let's make sure that the companies who are utilizing this technology and providing the on-ramps and off-ramps into this space adhere to certain rule sets to ensure consumer protection is adhered to. And regulation is widely misunderstood. To say to regulate this industry as a whole, if that is their standpoint, is almost like expecting a lifeguard to stop a tsunami.
Yeah.
You just can't do it, because if you look at the other side of regulation and what regulation alienates in a traditional financial system, we've got 7.5 billion people on this planet. The ones who could benefit from what the creme de la creme of what the banking world has to offer is actually less than 2 billion.
Yeah.
So you've got the vast majority of people, the other 5 billion, who are completely void of a financial system due to regulatory rule sets such as AML, KYC, and all the rest of it. Then if you look at, okay, what environments are these people actually living in right now? And are you going to be able to get these people to adhere to regulatory rule sets when they feel so oppressed? Because you've got situations like Venezuela where they've experienced parabolic inflation, where there's no animals in the zoo because they're so impoverished right now, and they're starving and they're desperate that they've effectively eaten the animals that were in the zoo. So you're going to try and impose regulatory rule sets on these people who are already feeling the brunt of government-run systems. It's just not going to happen. And what people don't understand and realize as well is that of every fiat currency ever in existence, the average lifespan is only 27 years, right? So when you start looking at things that way and then say, okay, we've now as engineers and as people within this space, not only have we got the tool sets with the internet of spreading knowledge and information around the world, we can now mobilize our efforts. We have a monetary system that's built on the same principles. Therefore, I don't need to ask for permission. And that is the whole benefit, and why this technology in this space is growing so exponentially, is because you've removed permission. That is its underpinned value. So even talking about putting it in when you can't is quite naive.
Fascinating. We've got to move on very quickly. When we last spoke, I think it was around about the time the ETF failure to get ETFs for Bitcoin. Just want to bring up the price again for Bitcoin, if I can, just quickly highlight where we were at that point. I think at that point you were saying that it was unlikely to happen this time around. Do you see ETFs ultimately coming in? And aside from that, here we are now at 1827, I think 1,827 for Bitcoin. Is 2,000 the next stop-off point?
2000, to be honest with you, I thought about a week ago, it looked like the market really wanted to get there. Psychologically, it seemed like that's where the market wanted to go. I'm very confident, I still stand by my comment that I made the last time that I was on your show, that we will see $2,000 a Bitcoin by the end of the year. And it seems like very aggressively we're heading in that direction. So I'm very, very confident about $2,000 a Bitcoin by the end of the year.
ETFs, do you think that's you're equally as confident that it will happen at some point?
At some point, absolutely. Whether it be in New York, I doubt.
Right, okay.
I think more than likely not. Places like Japan right now would have actually legalized Bitcoin. Seems like a more palatable place to...
That's a very interesting point. That's for another time. Michael, thanks indeed for joining us. Michael Hudson is Chief Executive of Bitstocks, joining us there with an update on where we are with Bitcoin, having lost ground and has now got its market capitalization of below 50% of the entire cryptocurrency range.